Welcome back to the Revolutionary Communist Podcast. My name is Joel Bergman. I'm here with Julien Arseneau, and we are going to talk about the crisis in Quebec. There is, if you don't read French, you probably don't even know that it's happening, because as is quite often the case in Canada, the English media does not cover what's happening in Quebec. Only time they do is they bring in something to fearmonger about Quebec breaking up the country or whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is, in Quebec, which is the second biggest province in the country, with a very militant labor tradition, with a lot going on, there is an abject crisis at every conceivable level. There's an economic crisis like everywhere else. There's a political crisis, and it's affecting pretty much all the political parties. And there's a brewing class struggle as well. So Julien and I are going to go through what is happening in Quebec. And this is, part of our task as internationalists, as revolutionary communists, as Marxists, has always been to bridge the national divide. We want to unite working class people across the language barrier. And this applies mostly to, I'd say mostly to Anglophones. A lot of people in Quebec, they can read English, they understand what's going on in English Canada, but Anglophones don't understand what's going on in Quebec. So we're doing this episode here to basically educate the English audience that listens to our podcast of this incredible events that are actually taking place in Quebec and what they mean and what we can do about it. So the start, Julien, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, where to start? I mean, there's a lot going on, but let's start at the top, because you often sense that when there is a crisis in society, it starts at the top, at the very top, and that's what's going on. The CAQ, the Coalition Avenir Québec, Coalition for the Future of Quebec, has been in power since 2018, which itself, its election in 2018 was a big earthquake. They broke the two-party system dominated by the Liberals and the Parti Québécois for decades, and won a landslide in 2018. And then during COVID, François Legault became the most popular premier of the whole country, won again in 2022, very easily the election, an even bigger landslide. And all of this is going away. Now the CAQ has plummeted in the poll, went from the most popular premier in the country to even more unpopular than Justin Trudeau, if you can believe that.
It's a difficult task.
Difficult task, but exactly. Absolutely hated. Some polls even put the CAQ at receiving 0 seats if there was an election tomorrow.
How many seats they have now?
They started with something like 90 in 2022. So a big upset is being prepared. They're 4th in the latest poll that I saw yesterday, and they're absolutely hated. And meanwhile, what you also see is, in the 2018 election, Québec Solidaire had its first breakthrough.
Québec Solidaire is the left-wing party.
The left-wing party. We'll talk about it a bit more later. Now, they're also in the doldrums. And the PQ, the Parti Québécois, which had been almost destroyed after these...
I thought it was dying.
Yeah, many people thought so after the last 2 election cycles, is back at the top of the polls. So clearly something is changing, something big is happening. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But the first thing is the CAQ, absolutely hated in all corners of society. And that's the background of everything that's going on. Right. The rise of the PQ, and also what the CAQ is doing. They have basically 1 year to go until the Quebec election, which is October 2026. If it doesn't happen before, I'm not sure that will be the case. But they promised for their last year basically to attack the working class, to cut. And it seems like they're almost deliberately trying to be more unpopular. Yeah. So that's what's going on at the top, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you've already hinted at it there. Why are they unpopular? Because I do remember that they were very popular. I remember during COVID, there's even memes about François Legault, when he said the thing about drink a glass of wine, have a time, relax at home, don't worry about it. And there was the whole thug life thing with his glasses. He was being but it kind of reflected that kind of thing, reflected the fact that he was so popular. And now he's hated. There's ministers, there's people in the government quitting, there's all sorts of scandals. They've been caught in corruption scandals and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But on these, but how do, I guess let's just get into a bit of what exactly are they doing that has led to them collapsing in the polls? It is a complete collapse in the polls.
Yeah. Well, I think to understand why they're so unpopular, it's also good to understand the broader context of how they got to power in the first place. Because, since the late 60s, in Quebec, you had this ping pong between the Liberal Party of Quebec and the PQ, trading power for, almost 50 years. And one of the main debates, obviously, was federalism, sovereignty, and all of that. And there's been a crisis in Quebec, especially since the 90s. And there's been vicious austerity carried out by both the Liberals, which is no surprise to anyone, and the Parti Québécois, who had both got themselves discredited after, decades of attacking the working class, attacking the students, and there were big movements against that as well. The movements, common fronts in the public sector, the student strikes, the famous 2012 student strike. There was one in 2005 as well. So what you saw was class struggle coming to the fore in Quebec, especially in the 2000s and 2010s. And people looking for a class way out. And you saw the rise of the CAQ on that basis. The CAQ who promised to, they basically said, we'll set aside the question of sovereignty, federalism, defending the status quo, essentially, on this question, but saying, we'll fix Quebec, fix the economy, invest in education, healthcare, so promise to get Quebec going economically. François Legault was obsessed with this question of catching up with Ontario in terms of productivity and all of that.
Good wages,
good jobs. Exactly. Good jobs, good des emplois payants, des bonnes jobs payantes in good Québécois parlance, good paying jobs. That's what they promised, and they rode to power on this basis in 2018, and a bit of this populist right-wing thing as well, defend the Quebec identity and all that stuff. And they rose to power with all these promises. And also, the CAQ, we, the Marxists and others, we were under no illusion. This was a party of the bosses, literally speaking. Most of their...
was a millionaire,
and their MNAs, the member of the National Assemblies, were mostly from the business community and all of that. But for a time, they were able to avoid carrying out big austerity. Then COVID delayed things as well. So they didn't make themselves that unpopular. They were able to buy time. But there's been in Quebec for a long time, the Quebec capitalist class, the ruling class, has been willing for a long time to attack the so-called Quebec model, the big welfare state, relatively speaking, the strong unions. Quebec is still the highest union density in the whole of North America. And the ruling class doesn't like that. And they've been wanting to attack this. So this happened with the Liberals in the 2000s, the PQ in the 90s, briefly in the 2010s. So every government has been under this pressure of the ruling class to attack the Quebec workers. The CAQ was able to avoid it for a while, but now they're on the offensive. And I can just name a few things. They implemented vicious education cuts last spring, just as school was ending, hoping there wouldn't be any turmoil around that. They're not that stupid. There's been an attack. Basically, they opened privatization of hydro. They also gave themselves fat bonuses. What is it? A 30% wage increase for the MNAs.
Nice to get to decide on your own wage increase.
Yeah, that's right. At the same time,
a lot of workers would like that.
Yeah, exactly. If only we could decide. While at the same time giving peanuts to the public sector. And now, they also eliminated lease transfers, weakening the ability of tenants to keep the rents
low. For a lot of cities around the country, that's a weird thing. But in Montreal, it was amazing. You could transfer a lease to somebody else, and the rent wouldn't go up.
Whereas they weren't allowed to.
In Toronto, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. You couldn't do that for a long time.
Yeah, and their housing minister, who was a landlord, unsurprisingly, they cut that. They made themselves massively unpopular.
Basically doing the bidding of the bosses,
exactly,
of the landlords, of the big millionaires, billionaires, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. And then just in the last few weeks and months, already hundreds of layoffs in the public sector, an attack on doctors, which is basically making a bunch of them go to Ontario, New Brunswick, attacking the pay, the way the doctors
Doug Ford, they produce an ad welcoming Quebec doctors.
It's cheeky, but there's something going on. They successfully put the doctors against them, which is not always the most militant sector.
But scandalously with that one, we were talking the other day about it. As they attacked the doctors' pay, they also passed a law that basically gags them. Mm-hmm. It takes away their freedom of expression. They are not allowed to challenge this. Mm-hmm. If they do, they get fined. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
people like to talk about, the left cancels people and the cancel culture, and they won't let you talk. And What the hell are you talking about? This is actually... Nobody's saying anything about that. Well, nobody on the right is saying anything about that.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the two big things that are going on as well in terms of direct attacks on the labor movement are this bill Law 14, which is going to basically, it was passed in the spring, and it's going to enter into effect next week. And this Law 14 is basically the Quebec version of Article 107 of the federal government, if people remember.
The Labor Code,
yeah. The article of the Labor Code, which allows the federal government to just decree, okay, your strike is over, it's going to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board, it's a done deal, it's over.
You have no right to strike.
Yeah, you have no right to strike. Now the CAC was like, oh, this is interesting. That's what the labor minister said last year. It was like, oh, this is a very interesting way to deal with the labor movement. And now they've implemented basically the same thing for the Quebec jurisdiction. So that's a big attack on the labor movement. And this new thing they want to introduce is Bill 3. They're discussing it as we speak, as we record this episode, which is basically an opening into managing the finances of the unions, like making part of the union dues optional. They're saying, union dues that go to labor stuff, that's okay. But union dues that go to mobilizing on social issues, that's not okay, to put it simply.
This is an attack on the RAND formula.
This
is an attack on trade unions in general,
Yeah, so now there's this big movement brewing against these two things in particular, but against everything that the CAC has been doing. There's this big demo actually this Saturday in Montreal against the CAC, led by the main union federations. So yeah, that's what they've been doing. They've been making themselves massively unpopular. And we know this was going to come at some point. Yeah. The necessity of capitalism forces these governments to attack. And actually Quebec, their credit rating was downgraded last spring. So there is this pressure to how do you say in English, to make the finances sound from a capitalist point of view. So they're cutting and weakening the unions to prevent unions from fighting back against this stuff.
Yeah, this on the question of why this is happening, I think, like you've said there, the Quebec bourgeoisie, which wasn't always big and strong, but as a product of the Quiet Revolution and all this pushback against the English Canada and against the federal state, you have a very powerful Quebecois bourgeoisie, billionaires.
It's called the Quebec Inc.
Yeah, Quebec Inc.
They seem to be proud of that name. I think that's good.
they like that. People like Pierre-Carl Pellado, Québecor, big media billionaire, Power Corporation,
Bombardier,
SNC, big bourgeois. And there's been a lot of pressure that it's not just that they're bad people, but that in capitalism, in the capitalist market, in the world, there is fierce competition, and it's been increasing. And in the bourgeois circles, ruling class circles, they talk about this. And they know that this is not competitive to have high corporate taxes, environmental regulations.
A lot of unions.
Yeah, to have big unions, to have more union rights, more, even the stuff with the lease transfers. It's not useful because they want to attract investment, right? Of course, that's not good for renters. That's not good for workers when they take all these things away, because it leads to the rents going up. It leads to wages getting under attack. It leads to benefits getting under attack. But yeah, this goes all the way back to, I remember probably the biggest flashpoint in this shift was Lucien Bouchard, ex-PQ premier, who actually ex-Conservative Party minister federally as well. There's some crossover there. He came up with this manifesto called Pour un Québec lucide.
That was 20 years ago, almost exactly.
Yeah, pretty much 20 years ago. Basically means for a clear-eyed vision of Quebec, which basically warns about the rising threat of the Asian tigers, which is basically China, which is everybody knows now, the competition. And they basically put forward a whole bunch of things that they've been doing, attacking the unions, raising tuition fees, and the whole thing's make Quebec more competitive. So this is the program of the ruling class, and this is what every government has done. The Liberal Party has done. Jean Charest said this was music to his ears, and he was attacking, and he became extremely unpopular because of that. The PQ basically did cuts. They increased tuition fees after they rode to power on the backs of the student movement in 2012, 2013. So yeah, every government's had to do it. And the CAQ was elected kind of as a rejection, as you said, of the old parties. But they could not avoid the reality. They couldn't avoid attacking the workers. And now, with their last year, they're going all in, it seems like it. The big cuts across the board and weakening of the labor movement to try to weaken resistance. Because I think it's not just them. there'll be a different government elected next year. They won't get elected next fall. Maybe it looks like the PQ might get elected, and they will do the bidding of the bosses as well. Mm-hmm. And it's in the interest of the ruling class if they weaken the trade union movement. So really, that's what all of this represents.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So a couple other issues. So you'd think in this moment, the CAQ is very unpopular. The PQ and the Liberals have already been in power back and forth for 50 years or something like that. What about Québec Solidaire? That's the left-wing party. I was a member of that party ever since 2007. They founded in 2006 and call itself an anti-capitalist party in favor of the unions. You'd think that this would be very fertile ground for a left-wing party that defends the working class, that fights for socialism, fights against capitalism, would be able to make gains because of the anger of the population. But what is the situation?
It's not the case. That is not what is happening at all. Quite the opposite, actually. And that's the other element of the crisis of even just the past few weeks. That a couple of days ago, one of the MNAs of QS, Vincent Marissal, was expelled / quit, whichever side you want to believe.
I'm not fired, I quit.
Yeah, basically, yeah. He was called to say, oh, you're suspended from the caucus. He's like, you can't suspend me, I quit. And he's quitting, and he's considering joining the PQ. And he said that QS is too radical, blah, blah, blah. He's like, QS is disconnected, it's not working, this party is dysfunctional, I'm quitting. So we'll explain a bit that, but to go back to the general, if you go back to 2018, the CAQ won the election, but QS made their best score ever, 16%, doubling their percentage. They had 10 seats from 3 to 10. It was the first time the left, and QS is, in a sense, the expression of the Quebec left with all the good and bad sides. It was founded in 2006 actually as a response to this manifesto of Lucien Bouchard of the Québec capitalists. This manifesto pour un Québec lucide was answered with the manifesto pour un Québec solidaire, for a Quebec in solidarity. Yeah. And out of this came Québec Solidaire, the party. It was founded as an anti-capitalist party against the establishment, against also the what was at the time the third way, Tony Blair, this reformism, the NDP as well, that was considered, reformist, a party of, that accepted the system. QS rose in 2018. They had their best score ever. And you could think, there was a real possibility that the left would be able to counter the CAQ or to rise on the basis of their downfall. But that's not what's been happening. And in 2018, I remember that election, QS ran mostly, the gist of the message was clear demands that connected with the needs of the working class. And there was also a bit of red baiting against QS. They were
called the Marxists.
Jean-François Lisée, the PQ leader at the time, said they were Marxists. And Manon Massé, the leader of QS, was like, oh, but if it's Marxist to be in favor of better minimum wage, better working conditions, then I guess we're Marxists. It was funny the way she answered. But there was this red baiting. It didn't work. Actually, QS did their best score ever. Yeah. But then what proceeded was actually moderating the party, bringing it more to the center, ditching some of the most radical demands, and even just the way the party presented itself was like almost they were trying to be part of the establishment.
To be reasonable.
To be reasonable, to be accepted.
Cooperating.
Accepted and cooperating with who? With the ruling class, with the establishment. And that was especially reinforced by the arrival of Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois in the party in 2017. He was the leader, if people remember, maybe not actually, it's been quite a while. Yeah. He was the leader of the 2012 student strike. Painted as a radical and all the rest of it. He joined QS with a lot of enthusiasm, but by then he was definitely a different person, and he started. He said
that too. He said, "I've changed. I've grown older. I've become more, different."
Yeah, and he led the charge to make QS more moderate, more
so-called electable.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the word.
Party of government.
Yeah, that's what he eventually said, and the result is that QS actually stagnated.
Didn't work. Yeah,
it didn't work at all, and now you have this crisis where some people have left. Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois himself resigned from his position as the leader of the party.
Was that January?
Somewhere early this year. And yeah, now there's Vincent Marissal quitting. And actually, what Vincent Marissal said was really interesting. I think we should quote him. Because what is happening in QS is you always had this contradiction between what the impulse that gave rise to QS in the first place, fight the establishment, have an anti-capitalist party. They even said so. Like in 2009, they had this manifesto talking about going beyond capitalism and needed to fight the system. So that's how QS came into being. But then there's the pressure of the establishment, the pressure of the capitalist class. So there was always this contradiction.
The bourgeois parliament, especially how they had more seats. They had the seats, they have the bureaucracy, they have the money, and the pressure of the parliament weighs down, and the pressure to be reasonable and collaborative.
Yeah, and I think all of this, so this contradiction has always existed. And what you had over the past years was, I don't know how else to put it, a conspiracy of the leadership to undermine the radical traditions of the party.
That's what it is.
Or a quiet counter-revolution, if you will. A dishonest fight against the radical roots of the party, and to make it just a moderate, run-of-the-mill social democratic party. And to some degree that has succeeded. QS today is like...
it's not different than the NDP.
Yeah, I know they wouldn't like that, but that's the truth. And they're not that different from the PQ either, except on a few questions. They seem just a slightly more left-wing version of the PQ. And I think if you're a nationalist or an independentist in Quebec, well, there's the real thing, the PQ. Why would you vote for the fake thing? And actually, they arrived in the worst of both worlds, where they're not independentist enough for people that make that their main issue, and they're not anti-establishment enough for people that are sick of the system. So they're really stuck in a blind alley.
So crisis in the party. The party doesn't know what it stands for anymore. There's been a conspiracy, as you said, of the leadership against the ranks of the party, against the membership of the party, and against the tradition of the party, to change the party into something else. And Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois quit and said he had enough but he didn't go into it too much. And one of the things that led him to quit was the other spokesperson. What was her name?
Émilie Lessard-Terrien.
Yeah, she quit and said that she didn't like the internal dynamic, and that there was a clique around him that were controlling things, and that they were always trying to be reasonable and whatnot. And so it was clear she didn't really entirely understand what was going on, but she wasn't happy with it. Prior to that, you had Catherine Dorion quit, who was the really popular member of parliament who had
She had a bit of she's an artist. She has that
rebellious.
vibe.
She had this rebellious
vibe.
You can't tell her what to do.
Yeah.
Correctly, actually. She's she stands up for herself, and she doesn't get pushed around, and she doesn't like capitulating and making concessions to these bastards.
And around 2018, 2019, she was the most popular elected member of QS, by far. And she went to the parliament wearing a hoodie, and everybody ganged up against her. Oh, this is unacceptable. There's decorum in the house of the people, blah, blah. But she was very popular for doing things like that, like mocking the establishment, mocking the rules. But she was sidelined, actually, completely by these people.
She was silenced
by the leadership.
GND and them. And she resigned, and then Emily's resigned, and then GND resigned. He basically said, my work is done here.
But in the meantime, when the co-spokesperson Émilie Lessard resigned, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois at the time, that was a year and a half ago, he came out saying, this is not a conflict of personalities.
He said
it's a political conflict on what QS should be. And he said, I believe QS should be a party of government. What does that mean in the language? Actually, at the time, I remember you pointed out that this was exactly the language of Tony Blair in the UK. The same argument of that we should be a party of government. That meant ditch the radical ideas, ditch this idea of... Actually, in QS, this idea was that QS was a party of the street and the ballot box. And they wanted to make it a party of the ballot box, of the parliament, that it respects the rules, fits in. That's what it meant. And I think completely failed.
One thing I got to say on this is a completely false argument.
Yes,
the argument
a false dichotomy.
You're either a party that can get elected, or you're a radical party that stands for socialist measures and working class.
And will never achieve anything. That's what they say.
Nonsense. That's nonsense. And actually, Québec Solidaire proves this, that as they moderated the party and they made it more reasonable and collaborative, and the word is they recentered it, it became more irrelevant. And actually, this has also been the case with the NDP federally. The NDP has never taken power federally. Precisely, and the argument and the leadership is we need to get elected. but the party's never more unelectable, actually, because people don't see a reason, especially as the crisis of the system has gotten worse and the working class is angry and looking for answers. They don't give any answers. They don't give any answers because they're too busy collaborating with other right-wing capitalist parties in the parliament.
And I think that this really, it mirrors the crisis of the left, well, in the rest of Canada and in the world. Yeah. Like you have this, the left is in a complete abject crisis. They don't stand for anything. Yeah. They accept the liberal establishment. Yeah. They want to be part of it. They defend it, especially with the rise of these right-wing demagogues in one country after the other. They hold on to the coattails of the of the liberal establishment. Yeah. And that's what QS seems to be doing as well. They are what's the difference between QS and the PQ at the moment? Many people are saying that.
Very little.
Except some secondary questions.
So
they look no different. Yeah.
So Vincent Marissal quitting / being fired, whatever you want to call it, or being kicked out, is extremely important. And I just want to quote him because, yes,
it's worth it.
It was kind of known like what was going on, and we knew to be honest, we were, as an organization, we were a registered collective inside Québec Solidaire. La Riposte Socialiste was our name. We were very active inside the party, and we were fighting for the party to have a bold socialist program, and we're fighting against moderation. But as you were saying, it was done in a very dishonest way. It wasn't done in an open way. GND and these people weren't doing it an open way. But we were fighting against all the attempts to moderate the party program and the message and the approach and fight for a bold socialist vision. And everything we wrote is actually, when I read it, it's entirely true. Now it's all the dirty laundry is coming out. And some of it came out when GND stepped back. Some of it came out with Emily's. Some of it came out with Catherine Doria. But now Vincent Marissal has basically let the cat out of the bag. He went on Sunday. He went on Tout le monde en parle, which is the most popular Quebec talk show. And they asked him why he did what he did. I'll just quote him so you can see what he said. He said, "I tried to change this party and I failed." And the host says, "How? How did how did this happen?" He said, a bit like how Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois wanted to actually. And then we teamed up at a certain point on that. The word, he says this, the word recentering is a bit taboo in QS. But so that everyone understands here, I won't go into the jargon, but it is a question of recentering, of rationality, of being a little bit less left-wing. That was basically, it's very clear what he's saying. And I think, so what's happened is he's quit, and they all the QS leaders and the parliamentary heads, they're mad. They're freaking out. They're denouncing him, calling him an opportunist. I see on social media all these QS activists, well-known people, denouncing him, angry. So this is, and I think they're also angry at him because he's saying the truth. He's saying what they all tried to do. They all participated in this conspiracy against the members and tradition of the party, and now he's saying it in the open. You're not supposed to do that. And that's really the significance of this type of thing. And I'd say this is not something that is only happening in Quebec Solidaire. This happens in the NDP. This happens in left-wing organizations, parliamentary, social democratic organizations. There ends up being this bureaucratic clique that is conspiring against the members and against the traditions of the party. We need to fight against that. But this is a clear-cut case example out in the open.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add because, the leadership has no answer. They're just saying, Sol Zanetti, who's now the co-spokesperson of QS, said, it's okay to change your mind, but there's an ethical way of doing it. They're complaining that he went behind their backs and discussed with the PQ, which is obvious. It is opportunism, of course, but that's beside the point. Yeah. Like, they're not actually answering his political criticisms of the party because they have no answer. And that's the other thing. You're right. Everyone either participated or let it happen. That the party let GND, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, moderate the party. And actually, Amir Kadir, who was the first QS MNA ever in 2008, one of the leaders for a decade, came out after that saying, QS should be radical, should stand for socialism. He even said that. I'm like,
he never said that. Good, but he never said that when he was leader.
Yeah, where were you all this time? So, and I'm sure of it. Like, I'm sure the argument is like, but we didn't want to get in the way. We didn't want conflict. What do you have now? you have conflict, because this is a political conflict between fighting capitalism, fighting the establishment, and moderating and being part of it. That conflict was inevitable in the party, and that's what's happening. And it tanked QS. Now they're at 8-9% in the polls, don't stand for anything, and they're completely stuck. And another thing I would say is that thing you mentioned. Like, I joined QS before I was a member of this organization, and I know many young people look towards it as a vehicle for change.
They were always
and
the
all
party
of that.
number one party for young people.
Yeah, until quite recently. When I joined this organization, we were active in the party, and I would say we were the only ones to publicly say what was happening, and we were told, no, what are you talking about? There's no recentering, it's just adapting to new realities, blah 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 blah. Well, Vincent Marissal said it. It was about recentering. They did it dishonestly, and I would say the left in QS let it happen. They did not fight this at all. So there's a lot of Marxists and socialists in QS, even to this day. They did nothing. They said nothing, and they have no answers right now. So yeah, and I think this is. It's unfortunate in the sense that there was big potential with this party. And you never say never. I mean, we thought the PQ was dead, now it's rising. You don't know what's going to happen with QS. But they're really in the ditch right now.
But to be honest,
it's going to be hard to get out of it.
I don't have a lot of hope in the current leaders. Ruba Ghazal and Solzhenitsyn, like what they say, they avoid main questions. They avoid talking about the content of things. And they said it's platitudes. Platitudes, weird. And they seem cowardly. They are cowardly, to be honest. So I think, the workers need someone with backbone and courage. You know what I mean? They need someone to stand up. Well, more on that later, because there's a little bit of that happening. But actually, on this question of Marissal, and on the question of what the QS leaders say, he made it very clear, actually, why he quit. He said, the straw that broke the camel's back was the strike of the STM workers, the metro workers. And he said the party, QS, was the only party to support the union, to support the workers. And he said that was the straw that broke those camel's back, and it showed that the party was on the wrong side of history. That's what he said. The wrong side. What side? So they should have been on the side of the bosses?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. It seems like he bought into the whole argument. There was this, for lack of a better term, shitstorm of an argument in the media in Quebec against the workers, saying they're holding the population hostage. You know the argument. We've seen it a million times. In that moment, you need to have some spine. You can't be bending, and he wanted to bend.
Yeah.
And I have not seen anyone talk about that. I've not seen anyone address the recentering stuff, because what are they going to say? They can't say anything about it. He should have been denounced not for being, Solzhenitsyn said he was not respectful or ethical. The way he left, he said it's fine that he left, but the way he did it was wrong. They should have been much more strident, should have been clear. He's chosen the side of the bosses. And the bosses, and the PQ was on the side of the bosses, and the Liberals was on the side of the bosses, the CAQ was on the side of the bosses, and we need to be on the side of the workers. That's what they should have said.
Yeah.
But they don't say that. So that's part of the problem with the leadership, and that's why they're so disconnected, actually.
Yeah, they're quite stuck, and I would say. I just want to really emphasize one point, because this idea of Marissal that we need to moderate and be more rational and all of that. It's BS. And actually, it's really important to push back against that, because there is that caricature of QS, which is, that is saying like, it's a party of militancy that doesn't want to take power. The point is actually, with bold socialist policy, with the strident denunciation of the ruling class, of the capitalists and their parties, that would make them popular. You only need to look at New York. I mean, Zoran Namdani is in a way an example of that. Like he talked about being a socialist, not apologizing for it, standing on clear demands that if implemented would raise the standard of living of New Yorkers, connecting it with the criticism of the system. Now, I mean, I don't want to criticize Zoran. There's some problems there, but the point is, the idea of socialism, this idea of fighting the system, that would be popular, not this run-of-the-mill moderate. Like, I mean, Vincent Marissal is the most uninspiring figure I can think of.
Actually, connected to this, there's not just the ideas they stand for, but also the method. And it's connected to what Mamdani had some backbone to him. He'd stand up, he'd fight back against Cuomo and these people. Probably the best example of the problem with the current leadership of QS was shown in this meeting where Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the leader of France Insoumise, the left-wing party in France, which has actually been quite popular, quite successful in a way, the main leading left party, he came and they did an event with him. And in that event, he talks about what the left needs to do.
Yeah, the left should be unapologetic.
Unapologetic. Yeah. And he said, and you shouldn't be afraid to get attacked from the media. And that actually, if you are getting attacked, you're doing something right, because it's their media. And actually, by getting attacked, you're drawing a line, in the sand. And Ruba Gazelle's response was very indicative of the mentality of the leadership. She said, oh, that's interesting for France, but in Quebec, we're not like that. We're more consensual.
It's a Quebec value to be
Quebec
consensual.
value to be consensual and work together, which is, I don't know, man. I lived in Quebec for a decade and a half, and I'm from the West. I never been into, I never lived in a place that was more class conflicted, and not just even class. There's the question of nationalism, federalism, different fights. To be honest, sometimes fighting, like physical violence, like. Crazy strikes, the student strike, battles with the cops. What do you mean? This is not consensual.
Yeah, the radical traditions of the Quebec labor movement, that's not consensus. It was,
Yeah.
many times it was very much the fist in the face,
And I think Quebec workers are looking for that type of leadership, and instead they get in this soft, cowardly, capitulatory, concessionary, weak leaders, or non-leaders, and that's why they don't get anywhere. We didn't even mention that. They're last in the polls. The polls show that QS, so the CAQ would probably get wiped out. QS, and it's related to the Marissal thing, QS would probably be reduced to 2 or 3 seats just in Montreal, and actually one of the seats in Montreal that they would lose would be Rosemont, which is Marissal's riding, which, surprise, surprise, who's polling number 1 there? The Parti Québécois. It was a Parti Québécois seat before QS won it, and so it looks like that would lose. So obviously Marissal's making the calculation in his head, saying, I've tied myself to the sinking ship, I'm going to go, and I think it is almost a certainty that he will run under the PQ banner next election, if he does run, which it seems like he will. So, that's the situation. It's this weak leadership that doesn't inspire anyone and keeps capitulating, and almost has a theory that they should capitulate in order to appear reasonable. But the more they capitulate, the more they get attacked, and the more they're made fun of.
Yeah.
And people make fun of them. They see them the gauche, like the kind of loser left almost,
Yeah. I think in the eyes of the establishment, QS will never be moderate enough. Yeah. They don't want QS. Actually, at the end of the day, QS is a different party. It's not a party of the establishment, of the rich, of the capitalists, and probably never will be. So we need to stop to try to bend to these people. We need a left that actually has a backbone.
Yeah.
I think that the backbone, the problem is they have no ideology, no ideas. I mean, we can talk about that later, but this is what is sorely lacking in the left, in Quebec, in Canada, in the world. Like a clear vision of what the capitalist system is, how to fight it. That's what's sorely lacking. So we'll see where it goes, but that's the thing. The working class of Quebec has no voice at the moment. No voice actually taking the bull by the horns and fighting the system. And that's the contradiction that needs to be resolved.
Speaking of the working class, so we mentioned these attacks for the CAQ already on the union movement. And the purpose of that is obviously to weaken opposition, not just to what they're doing, but what future governments will do, to give the ability of the government to take away the right to strike, and actually importantly, we didn't mention, take away the right to strike without a vote, without a debate, without anything, just dictatorial, authoritarian. People like to talk a lot about, there's authoritarianism everywhere. What's this? They're usually referring to something Donald Trump did. This is a clear authoritarian measure that the federal government has used, and now they're trying to do it at the provincial level, to take away the right to strike just by decree.
Yeah.
From up on high with no debate. Mm-hmm. And then there's this attack on union dues. And then there's the general program of austerity measures. Quebec has a massive deficit. They had a massive deficit last year. They have another one this year. The credit rating has been downgraded, so it means they have to pay more on credit interest payments. They can't avoid this situation. So this big attack, then, what are the unions doing? Because as we know, you said Quebec has I think it's around 40% of the workforce unionized, has a militant tradition, had a general strike, insurrectionary general strike in 1972, has had many militant class struggles, many movements. So you'd figure like, okay, now is the time for the Quebec working class to fight against these bastards, right? So what is the state of the labor movement?
Yeah, it is interesting what's happening because, there are especially these two bills, the Law 14 on the right to strike, Bill 3, the attack on union dues and all of that. That's the main thing. And the leader of the FTQ in particular, which is affiliated to the CLC, talks about these laws need to go away to be how do you say in English?
Rescinded.
Rescinded, yeah. Thanks. The unions are mobilizing. There's this big demo on Saturday. The RCP in Montreal, the PCR will have a big communist contingent at that demo. If you're an Anglophone that lives in the area, please join the contingent. And the FTQ president in particular, Magali Picard, she's been, talking the talk against these laws.
Let's see if she walks the walk.
Yeah, that's a question. But she's been saying, we are at war. Actually, by the way, that was François Legault a few weeks ago said, we're ready to go at war with the unions. Where she answered in kind, saying, we are at war. This is the battle of our lives. She said, we have the quote here. They're creating a monster. We will become more powerful than we've ever been. We won't bend the knee. We're going to fight these bills. And she even talked in her speech about building towards a strike for May Day. Call it a social strike. That's a vague...
It's more or less a general strike.
Let's put it that way. So talking about a strike for May Day, that is very interesting. And if the union leaders are preparing a strike for May Day, that's very good.
Do it. Do it. Let's do it.
There's no other way. So there's finally some mobilization after a long period of not doing much, to be frank. But that's good.
Okay, so great. So everything's good then, right?
not quite, because that speech also says that, it's a battle of our lives, but thankfully there's an election in 10 months, and this is our only hope. And basically she says that we need to convince the candidates to the election that their party promises to rescind these bills. And that's basically an appeal to QS, of course, but also the PQ and the Liberal Party, of all people.
Right.
So, and actually the FTQ Congress is this week. I saw the photos this morning. The leaders of the three parties in opposition, QS, the Liberals, and the PQ, were invited to the FTQ Congress.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy. And she's basically saying our only hope is the election. So there's a contradiction here between this big talk and this tactic. And they even talk about launching a campaign, mobilizing FTQ workers to go talk to election candidates to convince them to rescind these bills. Now, I think there's many problems with that. I mean, the Liberal Party of Quebec it's the party of capital, with a capital C.
The main capitalist
party in Quebec. Has attacked the workers repeatedly. And the PQ is the party that typically talks left a bit. They talked in the past about a bit of prejudice in favor of the working class, in favor of the workers.
They've had some union support.
Yeah, in the past. And when push comes to shove, the PQ does attack the workers. They broke the construction strike in 2013. There was a very famous militant nurses strike in 1999 that they broke. But actually, you don't need to go that far. This STM strike you mentioned, the strike of subway workers in Montreal, was, obviously a strike is disruptive. That's the point, to force the bosses to listen and to make concessions. And all these parties except QS were in favor of using this Law 14 to stop the strike.
So they liked the law.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
you don't need to bring them to your Congress, ask them what they think about it. They've proven in practice.
No, that's what they will do. If the Liberals, they could take power next year, but the most likely case is a PQ. And what are they going to do to the working class? They will be forced by the capitalist class to attack the workers. And they won't have to twist their arms. That's what they were doing a couple of weeks ago, saying they would attack the STM workers, prevent them from exercising the right to strike. So these parties have said where they stand. So there's no reason to believe that they would rescind these bills or replace them with something better. So this is a completely wrong strategy, which will not work. Yeah,
I would say that they would maybe rescind the bills. I remember the PQ rescinded the Jean Charest tuition increase but why did they rescind it? Now, bourgeois parties, they don't acquiesce to you asking them, or you writing them letters, or you calling them. We've made this point about the Palestine movement. There's this dominant tactic that's pursued by most of the main organizations. It's like phone banking and emailing your MP. You're emailing imperialists and Zionists and trying to convince them not to do that. That's not how that works. They're not going to bend. Now, they could bend to pressure. But what pressure? The pressure of the class power. And the balance of class forces in our society is massively on the side of the working class. So if the unions do mobilize and they do organize for a general strike, and they do every time these laws, they try to implement these laws, either the union do thing or the Bill 3, what is it?
Bill 14, yeah.
Sorry, Bill 14, where they take away the right to strike. Defy it.
Yeah.
The Air Canada flight attendants showed how to beat these laws. Just take the piece of paper, rip it up, we're defying the law, and mobilize en masse. And then what happens is one of these parties, the government, maybe the PQ, oh yeah, we'll get rid of the law. I remember Pauline Marois, all of a sudden, who's a millionaire, she used the old leader of the PQ in 2012, started banging a pot and pan, wearing the red square, yeah. Going around, all of a sudden talking as if she was on the side of the students and the workers, even though her party supported the tuition increase to begin with. So I'm not saying that they can't change, or they can't, obviously we don't trust them, and they're only doing that under immense pressure. But that's the type of pressure that needs to be built. That's the type of thing that needs to be fought against. In the streets, in the workplaces, mass mobilization. So hopefully this demo is huge. I know in the past the Quebec unions, if they really want to and they put their resources to it, they mobilize tens of thousands of unionized workers to rallies. And they can organize a general strike. They can.
Yeah, they totally can. And actually, on this question of the parties and all of that, the FTQ president said... She said in her speech, she said, I know a lot of you, she was talking to workers, to metal workers in particular, and she was saying, I know a lot of you are livid against the PQ leader, want to take his head off, arracher la tête in French.
Yeah.
But, we need to show that we're able to have a dialogue. And that's the perspective of the union leaders. And it's not just Quebec, it's a general thing that you have the crisis of capitalism.
Yeah.
You have austerity, you have a tax, you have this need to create a business-friendly environment, to cut jobs, to cut wages.
Yeah.
We live in a new epoch where the class struggle is becoming, or the one-sided class struggle of the bosses is becoming more vicious, and the workers want to resist, want to fight back.
Yeah.
But the leaders are living in a past where you could have some concessions, you could maybe talk it out, get a few crumbs, and move on. The workers wouldn't be over the moon, but they would get something to get by. No, that's no longer the case.
No, it's just
there's more and more
backwards.
Yeah, there's this contradiction between the needs of the movement, the attacks of the ruling class and their governments, and the meekness of the leaders that say, oh, we want dialogue, we don't want to go too far. So this is what is expressed here, because she's talking the talk, talking militant language, reflecting the pressure of the members, obviously, and damping it down. Saying, oh, we should be nice with these people, otherwise they won't listen to us. That's a big contradiction that you see in the labor movement all across the country.
So connected to this, I think we're kind of getting to the end here. Mm-hmm. One thing that Vincent Marissal said, which is related, is he said the problem with QS is that they don't address the concerns of the population. They don't have a real fiscal and economic plan for the middle class. Now the problem is, in the past, you could kind of, as you said, you could kind of have a bit of a certain thing that kind of sort of worked. In this period of economic crisis, massive crisis, there's huge, massive overproduction in every country, in all the industries. And then with the trade war, and that's why you're having the trade war, right? Because each jurisdiction, each government is trying to protect its own industries and its own markets. And Canada, for a long time, benefited off of, and Quebec in there, benefited from being able to sell their products to America. Aluminum and steel from Quebec, airplanes, cars, textiles, whatever, you name it. And that's all gone away now. And so, the Canadian bourgeoisie and the Quebecois bourgeoisie are massively subsidized by the state. Actually, Quebec, they've had the scandal with Northvolt, which they lost hundreds of millions of dollars, basically handing corporate subsidies to this big electric battery plant that closed. They went bankrupt. And this is just the case all over the place. So what, in this situation, the point I'm raising is, what is a reasonable economic fiscal plan? So what we would argue is that any plan that tries to guarantee capitalism, that doesn't, try to get, what I mean by that is try to guarantee that the means of production, the factories, the mines, the banks remain in private hands, is going to lead to betrayal, is going to lead to reduced living conditions, and inevitably attacks on unions, because you have to be competitive, right? So this is why the left needs to fight. The left doesn't just need to fight. The left needs to fight with ideas. You need to have ideas. We need to put forward a bold socialist vision. These bastards are going to close up their factory, laying off thousands of workers and moving overseas to another jurisdiction or to America, not overseas, but a more competitive environment for them. Just expropriate it, nationalize it, implement socialist planning. And I think this is the type of vision that QS could have brought and failed to, and instead moved down the road of this, we have to be reasonable, responsible, which means responsible managers of capitalism, which in this period of capitalist crisis means managing the downward trajectory, managing falling living conditions. And that's what we see with NDP governments who are in power in certain provinces.
BC, Manitoba.
Yeah, exactly. And that will not lead to anything good. And actually, I believe one of the reasons QS was it was founded, yes, a rejection of the PQ, a rejection of the Liberals, a rejection of the Lucides around Lucien Bouchard, but it was also like Bob Rae had taken power in Ontario, and he had
betrayed.
He had betrayed, and he had put forward this reasonable vision. He actually famously said, the socialists have lost the economic argument, which I find ironic because he didn't actually try to implement socialism. He didn't do anything of the sort. And so QS was founded as a rejection of the NDP, partially because Ontario is the biggest province. Bob Rae had been in power and he had betrayed, and obviously that failed. So what we say is, this is why we always say reform or betrayal is inherent in reformism. And that's why what we stand for. We stand for real, genuine socialism, which is nationalizations, expropriations, and planning of the economy. In this period of crisis, that is the only way forward. And really, that's what QS should stand for. And I think that's what the labor movement should stand for.
Yeah.
And if you really want a bold, inspiring vision that gives answers, that provides a way out to people. Look, this crisis it's just the beginning of the crisis, actually. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And so we need a left that, it's quite often said in Quebec, what's this saying? We need a left that...
Une gauche qui s'assume, like
an
unapologetic
left. Yeah, you need an unapologetic left that stands for something and does not apologize. And I think if we did that, working class people would people complain, oh, everyone's right wing, and I think that's nonsense. That's just because reformism has failed and doesn't stand for anything anymore. So what we need is a bold socialist program, socialist, and that's what we defend in the labor movement and the student movement. That's what we think. I think that's the reason why QS did not stand for that. That's why Québec Solidaire is in the doldrums. Ultimately, that's what's needed. And that's what we're going to be bringing to the demo on the 29th in Montreal. Yeah. Hopefully, it's a huge demo. And I real hope that there's this move towards mobilizing for a general strike. Because these laws that they put forward, it's not about one union. It's not about wages or pensions. It's a total broadside attack on the entire labor movement and therefore on the whole working class and the ability to fight the coming attacks. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any final words to say.
Well, first thing I would say is, watch this space, because there's a lot going on in Quebec.
Big time.
There is this brewing mood in the labor movement. Hopefully it leads to something. When I say watch this space, I also mean you should follow our website in English. We will put up articles about Quebec for our English readers as well. You can follow our French social media. We'll try to cover this demo. And to the best of your ability, understand what's said in these videos and this social media. So watch this space. And there is a blind alley in terms of QS. But in the labor movement, there's something going on. But there is a link between the two, which is what you said, that the left and the labor leaders, they lack a compass. It's very clear with QS. But I think these contradictions of the Quebec, of the FTQ, it shows, what's the compass here? The compass that's missing is a clear class analysis, a clear understanding that capitalism is at the root of all these ills, of all these laws.
We need a new system.
And that we need a new system, exactly. And that's not foreign to the labor movement, least of all in Quebec. In the 60s and 70s, it was mainstream to be a socialist in the labor movement. And not coincidentally, that's when the labor movement made some strides forward. As socialism was discussed openly in the unions. How to build socialism in Quebec? That was just part of the discussion. And it needs to come back on a higher level with a real party that stands unapologetically for this class analysis, this Marxist analysis of the system, and this socialist solution. That's what's desperately missing, and what we are trying to build at the RCP and the Parti communiste révolutionnaire in Quebec. And I think that's the way forward. And you look at QS, it's really like even GND, when he resigned, he said, I'm exhausted. The poor guy is barely 30 years old, and he's exhausted because reformism, trying to argue for reformism, doesn't work, and it's demoralizing and depressing. And we're enthusiastic because I think the wind is blowing on our side. The capitalist system is being discredited more and more every day, and it's making people open to the ideas of socialism, of communism, like never before. And that's where the world is heading, and that's what we're trying to do, to build an organization around these ideas.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good place to end it off. There's a crisis in Quebec. Again, I think you said it. Watch this space. We're going to cover more of the events that are going to happen. I think it's a very tumultuous time. And we stand on the side of the working class, fighting against capitalism. Whatever party is implementing the program of the bosses, we believe we need to fight it with bold socialist ideas. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please get involved. We'll include some links for some articles and things in the notes for this podcast episode. And get in touch with us. Go to our website, marxist.ca, and join the Revolutionary Communist Party to fight for a socialist future. Leave it at that. Speaking of Quebec, there's a very, very important event that occurs every year. It's the biggest communist meeting. I think it's the biggest communist meeting in North America. There's 600 people this year in Montreal at the Montreal Marxist Winter School. And next year, there's going to be even more. And related to this discussion, very, very relevant, that the theme of the Winter School, the Montreal Marxist Winter School for 2026 is reform or revolution. So I think we talked about the crisis of Quebec Solidaire, which is basically a crisis of reformism. And so we put forward bold revolutionary ideas. And so if you want to learn about that, you got to come to the Montreal Marxist Winter School. We will have a presentation on the Quiet Revolution, which was a massive movement of national liberation, and it had a massive class component of the Quebec working class fighting for its own interests in the 60s and 70s. So we're going to have a presentation on that. So it's very relevant to the topic. We have a presentation on the topic of reform or revolution. We have a presentation on communists and the labor movement, which I think is super relevant for what we've talked here about the FDQ. And we have many, many more presentations. So I encourage you, this is going to be a massive event. This is going to be a very high level event with high level presentations. And if you're interested, we'll leave a link in the notes. So it's marxist.ca/school, and you can register for the Montreal Marxist Winter School today. And come and join the RCP and learn the ideas that we need to fight back and win.